Hey guys, I thought of kind of an interesting problem for evolutionists, and a lot of you guys are going to enjoy this video, especially those who like to use critical thinking and want to kind of wrestle with the issues when this video is done. So I'm just going to raise a few questions which I want you guys to do your best to answer, and I'm going to give you kind of my own interpretation and my own answers, and then you guys can do whatever you want with them. So let's begin by asking a simple question. How complex is a human being? Now, a lot of people are going to take that in a lot of different ways, so let's try to simplify it in terms of coming up with a number of, how many parts go into a human being. So I came up with kind of a way of doing that. I figured, well, we have about 206 bones in our body. We have about, over a dozen organs. We have, I think the number is 100 billion neurons in our brain. We have about 500 million blood vessels. We have about 500 million nerves and nerve endings and dendrites and all kinds of interesting things going on. So you add these all up and you need to come up with, a number. Something we can all agree on. So I figured the number is somewhere between 1 trillion and 10 trillion. And I think, most people can agree that, yeah, if I was going to build an average human being, I'd need about 10 trillion, parts. And I think we can all, between that number, 1 and 10 trillion, and if we all can sort of agree on that number, we can continue. Does everyone agree? Good. So let's raise another question. How many changes have to be made between a single cell all the way to a human being, an average human being? Well, I would think about 1 to 10 trillion, because evolutionists believe that 2 billion years ago, I don't know how they think they know this, but whatever, let's give it to them for now. Let's say that a single cell began to mutate and evolve 2 billion years ago, and it had to, undergo a lot of changes, and eventually, through progressive generations, became a human being. So how many changes would have had to have taken place? Well, I think about 1 to 10 trillion. That seems reasonable to me. So if we take the amount of time, 2 billion years, and divide it by the amount of changes, which is 1 to 10 trillion, you're left with a number between 20 to 2,000 changes per year. Minimum. That would be your average. So here's my question to evolutionists. Obviously, if you believe life went from a single cell to the complexity of a human being in 2 billion years, that means a certain amount of changes would have had to have taken place. And if we look under a microscope at any given form of life, be it plant, animal, or even single-celled organisms, and we do not see the average amount of changes we would expect in order to facilitate the amount of changes necessary to go from a single cell to a human being in the amount of time that you guys claim that this happened, then we must conclude that you are wrong. That seems reasonable to me, doesn't it? So the question is, do we see 20 to 2,000 changes, physical changes, in any given life form per year? Which, if we say, let's make an average lifespan of, say, 50 to 100 years, I mean, that's like, you can see the numbers growing quite radically. How many changes would have to take place in any given life form during the duration of its lifetime? We simply don't see those changes. Now, how do I know that we don't see those changes? Well, when we ask an evolutionist, how long does it take to show us evolution? Because whenever we say, can you show us evolution happening today, what's the response? You guys know it. You guys know it as well as I do. They say, put your hand up if you've heard this, it takes millions and billions of years. Don't they say that? Of course they say that. It's so much, they say it so much it's like basically a stereotype. But that's what they say. So let's be generous, because we as Christians, we enjoy being generous. So let's drop the billions, let's drop the millions, which is plural. Let's just say it takes about 1 million years per change. Well, if a human being is about as complex as 1 to 10 trillion, and one change per year, or sorry, one change per million years, well, that's 1,000,010 trillion years, which is more zeros than I could possibly fathom. So they're obviously not going to say that, it takes 1,000,000 years for a change. So if you're an evolutionist, never again can you say it takes millions of years for evolution to happen, because number one, that would take far too much time. You would never be able to go from a single cell to a human being in 2 billion years if, it's only one change per million years. So evolution must, if it exists, must happen much quicker than that. About 20 to 2,000 changes per year. So let's figure out if those changes are taking place, because we can't push it back into the past anymore. We can't say, well, it's going to take 1,000,000 years for a change to take place, because well, that simply would be impossible with the time that we need to go from a single cell to a human being, which we've all agreed for what the evolutionists are saying is about 2 billion years. So evolution must be taking place a lot quicker than that if evolution is true. So do we see those changes? Well, by virtue of the fact that they tell us it takes, millions of years for changes to take place, shows us that no, we're not observing these changes. So they might say, well, on a genetic level, yes, there are all kinds of changes going on. Well, when people ask, us who believe in God, they say, can you show us God? And if you don't show me God, I'm not going to believe. Well, it's very easy to say genetic changes take place, but unless you show me, I'm not going to believe it. I'm certainly not going to believe that these genetic changes are the types of changes that will become physical attributes over any given amount of time unless you can show me. What I'm basically saying is the 10 trillion or 1 trillion differences between a human being and a single cell are not simply genetic. They are physical. They are physical manifestations of these traits. So to say that genetic changes are taking place doesn't really help your cause. We need 10 to 2,000 physical changes per year for the lifetime of any given organism, which is simply not happening. Sorry, it's not. So I think evolution's dead in the water now, because you can't just say changes take a long time. In fact, you have to say that a lot of changes are taking place all of the time, and we don't see any of them. Now, some might say, well, we see, bacteria becoming immune to antibiotics, and we see things adapting to their environment, but they're missing the point. Those are not changes in the complexity of the organism. Rather, they are alterations of the traits that it already has, which means that if they were created, and created with the ability to adapt without ever gaining complexity, then that fits the creation model just fine. What we need to see is bacteria getting new traits, and that is to say, new limbs, new organs, new complexity, not simply changing traits that it already has. So, like for Darwin's finches, no one of those finches had any trait that any of the other finches had. Rather, they had different shapes and different sizes of traits that all the other ones already had. So they might all have different sized beaks, but they all have beaks. None of them have a new type of mouth, that's something that's not a beak, or a beak with new intricate parts. None of them had any additional set of traits. But we should expect 20 to 2,000 additional traits per year. Forget their whole lifetime. So evolution is dead in the water, because we simply do not see these physical traits emerging at all. At all. Yeah, so I hope you've enjoyed the video, and we'll kind of wrestle with the issue. Show us the changes, otherwise we're not going to believe it. And don't let them pull the genetic card, because like they want to say to us, show us God, we're going to say, yeah, show us the physical changes, and they don't exist. Some people are going to try and say, well, because mutation, they say, is the cause of additional traits. But they forget that if mutations are indeed doing what they say they do, there would be more detrimental mutations than beneficial ones, because remember, it's random mutation, which means it's going to make more mistakes than it's going to make beneficial mutations. So it's going to make mistakes, which is going to kill a whole bunch of organisms, and it's going to, it's going to work against what they want to say. It's going to take longer periods of time to accidentally create beneficial mutations. So even if, 20 to 2,000 changes were happening per year, most of them, if not all of them, would be detrimental. So you're still going to have to wait even longer to get to the beneficial ones. And yeah, and we've never experienced or witnessed a beneficial mutation such that it added complexity to an organism in the way that I've described. We're not talking about adaptation here. So just wanted to mention that, and I hope you've enjoyed the video. God bless.